Welcome everyone to the pilot of a new series we're going to be trying here on the Game Wisdom channel. We're going to be discussing influential games and some of the major names and so on when it comes to the genres that we all know and love. So, for this one, it will be just the three of us, but for future episodes, if we can get some special guests, we will have them in our corner down there. For this episode, we are going to be starting with a genre that, well, kind of defined video games for a very long time, and that is platformers. But before we get into this, I'm going to give everyone once again a chance to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Josh and then go down to Seth.
Hey, my name is Josh. I'm a indie game developer. I'm currently working on Samurai Pig, and that's about it for now. Also, I'm on the Game Wisdom Key to Games podcast, Saturday with Josh. Other than that, Seth?
My name is Seth Goldberg. I'm an indie game developer and an indie game promoter, reviewer, something like that. I don't even know what it is. I work for a game called Terminal Conflict, where I'm PR and design, and I've also got the Strategy Informer project. I don't know what I'm doing in an a platformer game podcast, but we'll see.
We'll see where things go, but don't worry, when we get to these strategy topics, that's going to be like Seth talking for at least like 40 minutes of the conversation. But, like I said, for this series, and for the people watching us record, we're going to be breaking down kind of the games or major moments of each genre, and kind of talk about how the genre has influenced game design, and how its own games kind of influence itself. And let us know what you think about this series, and if you want to see more, we have a list, a huge list of genres we're going to be trying to get to. And if you guys want to pitch one or try to give us one to focus on next, let us know in the comments. So, platformers. There's a reason why we wanted to start with this one, as this is the genre that was kind of the first biggie for the game industry, from, we could argue, like 1983, 1984, to even maybe to like late 90s, early 2000s. This was the genre that, when people think about video games, they think about this. And there was a reason why I wrote my first design book on platformers. Like, this is a genre that, for both of you, I'm sure you have seen many indie developers all try to work on a platformer or have a platformer as their first prototype or project.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, like, for me especially, it was the most influential. Like, it's what got me into, like, creating games in the first place. The first game I saw was a Mario platformer, and I was just amazed that I could move something on the screen, and I was hooked, and that was it. And so, like, I think for most of us, it was like our first introduction into games. Like you said, it dominated the scene, and you couldn't really imagine a different type of game for a long while, right? So, yeah, definitely big.
You know, in 1981, I was 11, and I was pumping quarters into a little game called Donkey Kong in the arcades. And that is my first dealing with a platformer game. And then later on the computer, Lode Runner was the big one that I used to play. But still, to this day, if we're talking influential, Donkey Kong is the father.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and Donkey Kong was one of the first ones. I played the NES one. I never played the one in the arcade, but I certainly played the one on the NES. And platformers really began, like, as we said, like this huge push into the game industry or into game dev. And like Josh was saying, like, there was a time where platformer was code for any video game, whether it was a Mario game, Home Alone, Blues Brothers, Friday the 13th. If they could have figured out, they probably would make Jaws a platform somehow.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a platformer. I mean, he just slides around, scares you.
Mm-hmm. And, like, the growth of platforming, like, for a lot of, like, the younger people, like, we got to be really old men for this discussion today. Like, younger people today, when they think about what is considered popular, we can always point to 3D games, the RPGs, but again, for most of the 80s, 90s, and even into the early 2000s, the platformer was that genre that became dominated, and it really survived, or really thrived, probably until like early to mid 2000 when we really saw that push into 3D, and more specifically when Nintendo just kind of like officially, plant their flag and said that we are making the only one true great platformer.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and when they switched to 3D and basically like changed everything up, like, decided, like, created the standards for like cameras work in 3D, and just a lot of new things, how controls work, really inventive. And so, from platforming to 3D, until then it was platforming straight up till till Mario 64.
So here's a question for you guys, and this is going to be for people watching us record as well. Where did you fall in the great Sonic versus Mario war? Because that was kind of like the first great big console divide in the late 80s.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Seth, I want to know.
I was solidly in the Sonic camp.
Yeah, man. I had a feeling. Josh?
That was the fun thing for me. Like, I remember I like begged my parents for this is how the nightmare for like any parent today. I remember like begging my parents for a Sega Genesis. I want to play Sonic. I want to play Sonic. They bought me a Sega Genesis. I played Sonic, and then they announced Super Mario World. Like, no, I want a Super Nintendo. So they took back the Genesis and got me a Super Nintendo. But wait, Sonic's still really good. And eventually I just got both systems just because I drove my parents crazy.
No,
because they couldn't decide.
No, I was full on Mario. I was Mario all the way. And I even had a Mario themed birthday party one time. It was pretty baller. But like, go ahead. Yeah, I mean, and then eventually, I was like, God, a lot of my friends are playing. They're playing Sonic, so let me get a Sega. So I convinced my parents. Finally, got a Sega also, so I played Sonic on there, and I was like, and I went back to Mario. So
I never owned a Nintendo until the Wii.
Wow.
So, yeah, I was seriously going into the alternative consoles.
The other ones, man, all the other stuff. Yeah, right on.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the Dreamcast. That was probably my favorite console.
My guy.
We had one at EA at Origin that we would break out, and we would play this game with maracas.
Oh yeah. Samba de Amigo, I think it was.
Yep.
Yeah,
everybody loved that game.
I love the Dreamcast. Like, we're not careful. We may just this may segue into just the Dreamcast podcast.
Yeah.
Welcome to Console Cast.
Console Cast.
There we go. That'll be the next series after we're done with this one. For me, like with Sonic and Mario, again, like for people watching us right now who didn't grow up during that period, like, it is hard to put into words just how much the Nintendo-Sega rivalry really changed and influenced console games. And even to this day, again, there's the famous story of how Nintendo originally went with Sony to make a like a CD-based platform.
Yes.
It was going to be an add-on to the Super Nintendo to give it like its own graphics, and then Nintendo betrayed them because Sony wanted more control. They wanted, I think, to get part of the revenue sharing, and Nintendo said no. So they went with, you guys probably know the name remember than I do. The one they went to, not TurboGrafx. What was it?
I don't recall. I should.
CGI?
Should I totally CDI?
CDI.
Yeah.
And
I hope it's CDI. Because if we don't remember it, oh my gosh.
Let's see. CDI. The Philips CDI. So
right on.
instead of Sony deciding to just like give up, they thought, you know what, we have all this stuff to make our console. Let's make a console. And the PlayStation was born, and of course, Nintendo inadvertently created their what would become their biggest rival, and
their freak nemesis, yeah.
And essentially, what would become one of the big three console players to this day, and all because of Nintendo competing with Sega. Because for everyone who remembers, Sega was getting into like 3D and 32-bit technologies first with the Sega CD, the 32X, and even like the Sega Saturn. Like Sega was beating Nintendo at least to the market, but Nintendo, of course, had the advantage when it came to the games. And I love a lot of the Genesis games. I have the Sega Master Collection or whatever it is on Steam with all those games on there. And there are so many fantastic games. But Nintendo, and again, when we're talking especially about platformers, Nintendo's design has been the blueprint. I think like everyone has followed, at least at some point in their life.
Oh yeah, certainly. Every game is a derivative of Mario. But I mean, every platformer is. I mean, that is literally the perfect platformer.
Yeah. I mean, like you can go through it, like it literally is the perfect platformer. Like literally everything about it. Like you could when you go to and you play poor platformers, you can reference what it's missing or what is not there, which would be included in like a perfect platformer, for example. Yeah, I mean, it's just a standard and that's it. And to deviate from it, usually most of the time you end up failing. So it's good to see innovation, but again, the blueprint for it's perfect. It's just kind of like the design of the game. It's not to say that you can't add accoutrements and things onto it, but the base of it, like it would be saying like changing basketball or changing football dramatically. Like the basics of the game is there, and that's the way it is, or chess or something like that, for example. So.
And to our recent cast that we just did, talking about examining bad games, this was one of the big things that we brought up, that a platformer is very mechanical focus.
Yeah,
it's not something that we can, like, with a lot of genre, I know, like, when we get to strategy design, talking about more abstract design, like, there's something that Seth and I, we can certainly rant and rave about, the different elements and mechanics that go into a good RTS, or a good deck builder. But when it comes to platformers, a lot of that is just like inherently built into its gameplay. Like to Josh's example, or to his analogy about changing basketball, this would be again like rebuilding what is the frame of a car, or how even a car works. And it's why again, going back to game design deep dive platformers, I wanted to focus on it for the first book, because it's one of those genres where you can play 100 different platformers, and you can get 100 very different takes on jumping, on the physics of movement. And the ones that work versus the ones that don't, it can be very hard, I think, to put into words why. Like, I guess this is a question for both of you, and even for people watching this recorded. Like, when you pick up a controller, or you use a keyboard, and you're playing like a platformer, or any kind of game like this, what goes through your mind as to, you know, what's good or what's bad about it?
Well, for me, I mean, it's number one is responsiveness, right? Like it has to be instantly responsive, and that's number one. So when I'm pressing something, something's gonna happen regardless. Also coyote time, and then like the jump, like gravity, I would say like the top three. So like you have the that kind of jump, and those three right there. And then other than that, you know, interesting level design, stuff like that. Yeah. But that's like the main ones for me. Seth?
Responsiveness, level design. You know, my guilty pleasure platformer is Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze.
Whoa!
That had some seriously good level design.
I feel so bad because I've been wanting to play that one for so long. That's all I've heard is it's amazing.
It is difficult, but it is fantastic.
Yeah, because there's the Dark Souls of Donkey Kong. That's what I heard.
I mean, I sucked at it because I have very poor hand coordination with a controller. So, but it was a ton of fun looking at those levels and actually succeeding at it in some ways.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
For me, it's definitely the movement tech, how the character behaves, and then as both of you said, level design, making the level really take advantage of the movement tech. And I think to this day, and I could rant about this for like another hour, I'm not careful, I think this is the one area where a lot of indie devs have tend to struggle when it comes to platforming. They'll either have very interesting level designs or very well done movement tech, but very rarely do I see them both at the same time. A Hat in Time, for instance, which a lot of people have brought up as one of the best indie 3D platformers, I felt the level design was good, but the movement tech just wasn't really working for me.
Like soggy or something, I'm not sure. Yeah, it wasn't there, and the level design was fantastic, graphics fantastic, but as an indie like platformer, I mean, top notch though. But yeah, for sure, the movement, just like bouncing around and jumping around and how you feel like just walking and stuff like that is really important because that's mainly what you're doing, right? It's a big part of the core gameplay loop. So
yeah. And then there was Demon Turf. This was the one by the developer of Slimezen, which was like a very precision, very challenging platformer. Demon Turf had some fantastic movement tech, but I just got really bored of the level design. And it's hard to do things right. Again, it's why Mario is going to come up a lot in this, like the next 40 minutes, however long this conversation's going to last, is that it really married the best of both of these aspects. I mean, even going back to Super Mario Bros. 3 or even Super Mario Bros. 1, a lot of people can still remember the layouts of those levels. Again, there's a reason why
burn into my brain, man. Like I see the map.
Stage 1-1 in Mario is as recognizable as E1M1 for Doom fans.
Yeah. The thing that turns me off about platformers is the precision jumps. If they're really insane, you gotta hit that pixel just right. And that's something that Mario Brothers did really well, is the precision jumps were doable. And you didn't get horribly frustrated. Sometimes, yeah, of course, but it wasn't like, oh my god, I've been doing this for the last 6 hours.
Yeah, I mean, that's really where, when we talk about indie games more in the next few minutes, that's where we really saw that kind of shift with Meat Boy and let's not forget Kaizo. The entire Kaizo market has really embraced that.
So that's like when you're extracting, okay, what's the main aspect of platformers? They're difficult. And so, let's pump up the difficulty at them. And Seth, how you were saying about the precision and the jumping, that's one main thing that I see indie devs missing is the coyote time. So when you're on the side of the platform, you have a little bit of grace period where you can still jump. You don't instantly fall off. So if you instantly fall off, then they leave that off because sometimes the coding can be a little complex depending on how they're doing it.
Input delay can be a nasty
input delay for sure. All those input delay, missing the coyote time, and then it's just a totally soggy cereal bowl of a platformer. So
I've never heard that term before, coyote time, but it makes total sense now that you explained it.
And again, one thing for people watching, most likely we're going to bring up a whole lot of weird and esoteric terminology in this series as we go forward. I want to go back to Sonic and kind of talk a little bit more about how Sonic really for a time was the number 2 platformer. And as we all know, at least for the older audience, Sonic was positioned to be kind of the anti-Mario. Where Mario was more about, again, this very precise movement. You know exactly, how far he will jump at any time. Sonic was far looser. And more importantly, it was far more physics-driven than Mario ever did. And that, again, for better and for worse.
It was like OG Little Big Planet.
Yeah. I think they nailed the kinetics just absolutely perfect on Sonic, especially when you get into some of the more pinball levels.
Yeah,
Those are just
wild.
amazing.
I would like just zone out in the pinball levels, like at the physics on it for just the insanity. It was really good, really designed. But the difference between playing like a Mario and a Sonic though is can be like a little bit stark for sure. You all were talking about the level design. How do y'all feel about the level design of the Sonic games?
I was just about to ask that too. Yeah.
Mind blowing. You know,
Yeah.
those guys that were doing the level design for that are genius. I didn't actually like the boss fights. I just like, spinning and winning.
Getting and winning, yeah.
For me, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Josh.
I was going to say, I think for me, like, I like the themes that Sega always did for their level designs. I think they did that better than Mario. But again, as someone who likes, the mechanical, like the tech of moving and that kind of jumping, I always felt Mario levels were more solid in that respect.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Now I put the gold star on the level design in Mario and the movement tech and I'd give give that to Sonic there.
I think the collectibles, the rings, and I guess in Mario stars.
Coins are the ones you pick up. Yep.
I think they could have done more with that, and maybe they do now. I haven't really played a Sonic like in a long time.
How many do they have now?
A lot.
Roguelite unlocks based on coins or rings, I think would be fascinating to see happen. I don't know if it's up there.
I want to say that one of the Sonics tried something like that, where your overall ring collection could be used to unlock something, but it is failing me if I'm just hallucinating and building my own Sonic game in my head. Yeah, Sonic was, I think, and again, right now as we're recording this, they just released a new Sonic game, which I have not had a chance to play at all.
Yeah, I just saw that pop up in the headlines. I was like, "There's Sonic again."
Wow.
I think the problem for me for Sonic, and I think it has to do with that movement tech, is that they never managed to, once again, square those two circles. How do we have very unique movement tech, and how do we have levels that really take advantage of this? And to this day, the Sonic camera has always frustrated me in that regard, as it never seemed to give you enough leeway in order to see what's happening. Like, we look at my hands right here, like, when you're running full tilt, Sonic's maybe this far over on the screen, and it's near impossible. And again, I watch speedrunners. The speedrunner community, they don't care about that. They know every spike, every enemy drop, and it's kind of hilarious to watch a speedrun just go through a level. They're not even bothering to slow down. They go, okay, I'm going to bounce off this, go over here, hit this platform, jump over there, and they just never stop moving. They get to the whole Sonic level in 10 seconds.
Are you talking about the 3D or the 2D versions when you talk about the camera?
The 2D versions.
Okay.
Yeah, 3D. The 3D Sonic cameras were okay, I suppose. They did more you're running straight forward, either for the camera or away from the camera.
Resident Evil 1 camera style.
I much prefer the 2D Sonics.
Yeah.
The new one, Frontiers, I believe it's what it's called. I just looked it up. It's 3D, and it looks like the camera is kind of over your shoulder, but really far back.
Yeah, and with Sonic, they try there's been 2D Sonic games released for the past decade. Sonic Mania. I want to say there was a Sonic Generations, I think, is another one as well. The fans have really stuck with the 2D design of Sonic, but I think this has always been that issue that Sonic has had, is that when we look at Mario, once again, you can chart that evolution from 1 to 3 to World to 64 and so on. With Sonic, it's always, again, I guess pun intended, it's always been kind of stuck in the mud, despite Sonic's speed.
Yeah, so that's okay, so we were talking about like, okay, so the movement tech and the level design in Sonic, right? Like there's kind of a little bit of discrepancy, right? And if we go back to Mario, how they have unique novel mechanics and like certain levels and they all always work, right? Like each one you get maybe get the boot in one level or you turn into the rocket dude in another one or whatever. And they're all, even if they're unique and novel, they still work with the level design very well. So it's just like how you're saying Sonic is stuck in the mud. Sometimes it's really very 2D because there's not a lot of other like mechanics to it, like with the level design, because there is that disconnect, right?
Yeah, and I mean, as like one of like the gold standards of like Mario's theme, Super Mario Bros. 3, the Giant World. What was it for World 4? Like I think like every child still remembers that world. When you go in, all of a sudden the Goombas are like 30 feet tall, and every pipe is like this wide.
One of the best times of my life, yeah, for sure.
And again, you can like Mario can get away with that kind of ingenuity because they keep Mario's physics relatively, I think, fixed throughout these games. Like they really nailed down. Like going back to what we were saying a few minutes ago, they understand almost immediately how does Mario want to be, or how do we want Mario to behave in whatever game we're working on, and then how do we build these levels around that. Now, let's see if there's anything else about Sonic. Like I enjoy like speaking about like pinball, Sonic Spinball, so like one of my guilty pleasures right there.
I think one of the things I really loved about Sonic is all my friends at the time, and we were like 21, 17, 18. You know, it was our gamer group. We would sit down and we would pass the controller and we try to outscore the other person and stuff like that. So, you know, the only other game that I had that experience with was Tekken 4. And that, you know, those type of interactions can really boost your appreciation of the game, even if it's not great.
Yeah, like social aspects with the game could totally like boost up. Like, I mean, that's probably like a lot of the like shooters and stuff like that. We'll talk about later why they got so popular is just the community and just like, you know, like when we would go to the arcades and we would get to play fighters together and stuff like that, the communities you could establish, really cool.
I mean, anybody can understand Sonic instantly. It's not, I mean, it's kind of like easy. And like with Tekken, you know, button mashing works just fine.
Yeah, it works just fine too.
You don't need to know the 10-move combos. And eventually you'll learn them. But you can do fairly well with just, you know, little button mashing.
Yeah, that's one of the coolest thing about Tekken. You can kind of just jump in, and if you press buttons fast enough, you can trip the other player up, and you can kind of give a good fight there. Yeah, for sure.
And you know, from playing Mario at the arcades and stuff like that, that was intuitive as well. So when more complex platformers, you know, there's a barrier to entry there. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's why they haven't done as well, and Mario is still the gold standard. Because no one, you know, anybody who tries to leapfrog it, you know, creates a environment that's, you know, not inclusive.
What I think is kind of interesting... what I find kind of like interesting about what you were talking about the community aspect of this is that when we look at kind of like platformers as like a genre as a whole, it really didn't have, I think, at the time, like that same kind of like multiplayer respect in the same way as like fighting games, shooting, like the platformer. And I think we'll probably talk about like Fall Guys and kind of what we saw with like multiplayer platforming, maybe like near the end of our chat. But like for like the 90s into I think into like the 2010s, like it didn't seem like the platformer was like that same kind of, you know, community building genre. Next to, again, like the fighting game, the FGC was basically born out of everyone getting together and saying, we want to play fighting games with each other.
Yeah. The 90s were certainly the golden age of platform.
Yep.
By far. I mean, there's no doubt.
Yeah, and like to talk about like the other platformers, like one of the biggest, or probably the biggest one to not be from one of the bigger studios, will of course be Rayman by Ubisoft, Michel Ancel, and Rayman was really solid. Like this was probably like one of like the first really hard platformers of anyone who's played the original.
Very difficult. Yeah, amazing. Like the graphics really pulled you in, and you thought it was nice and easy. And then eventually, it was brutal. It was like OG Meat Boy, but slower reload times.
Mm-hmm.
Spyro wouldn't be called a platformer, would it?
Which one?
Spyro?
Spyro?
Oh, Spyro. Yeah, the dragon. That would be 3D platformer.
3D platforming, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I still have nightmares from Rayman at one level when like you have to like use his propeller hair to cut these rocks while you're drowning, pushing
that's
you down.
The one.
All it needs is that I will say one contribution Sonic truly has coined is that drowning theme.
The drowning music
has created it's PTSD like personified
for sure. And also the Ninja Turtles seaweed level. Yeah, that one too.
But
I forgot about Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, man.
I need to get more people to play that Cowabunga collection. I need to do like a 4-player turtle.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun. I didn't. How long did it go? It was a couple months back, or
yeah, like 2-3.
Yeah, I thought we were gonna do it then.
Yeah, we need to get that going. We need to get schedule a time. So we've talked about 2D platformers. We're about like 31 minutes in as well, so we'll try to keep this to maybe like another 25-30 minutes if that works for both of you. But the next big push, actually, before we do that, any other like non-big 2D platformers? I would say like Earthworm Jim was a big one. Gex. But yeah, again, like it's hard to talk about the non-mainstream platformers as they just never managed to. Again, this was kind of what led to like the platforming demise, at least among the AAA space, was that no one managed to out Mario.
Yeah, it was like literally. I mean, you had like some Donkey Kongs and Ghosts and Ghouls and but other than that, yeah, no one really could out Mario, and that was the big thing, is they just had the lock on that type of genre for sure.
It seems like they pivoted to Metroidvanias because there were, millions of them that came out. Everything seemed to be a Metroidvania for a while.
Everything is still called a Metroidvania, even if it's not a Metroidvania by some indie developers. And when we get to Metroidvania, and hopefully I get the Haku developer back on for that, that may just be like the entire conversation just on that one sentence right there. But as everyone in the audience knows, and what we haven't gotten to just yet, is that platforming went 3D, and that would be in 94 or 95 when the PlayStation 1 came out. And once again, Sony became they really got into the scene in a big way with their mascot, Crash Bandicoot. And Crash Bandicoot is one of those games that I honestly don't know how well it holds up as a 3D platformer. I tried.
Bad.
Oh, there! Now we're going to insult all the Crash Bandicoot fans.
I was very I didn't even really have I didn't even have full Rosan tinted glasses, and I remembered it, but it's really bad. It has not aged well at all. So the movement
is good.
Which one?
Character design was good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, it was like Pixar style, but yeah, it doesn't hold up.
I did the Insane trilogy that came out 2 to 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was again as we talk about the 3D era, going from 95 to maybe 2004, 2005. That was kind of when the other manufacturers kind of bowed out of platforming. It just was it lacked the camera, and this has always been that issue for a lot of 3D platformers, is giving the player that good depth of field. That I need to know, okay, if I'm here and I make a jump like here, where am I actually going to end up? Because there's a lot of 3D platformers with so frustrating cameras. And it's why one of the things I talk about is that you always have to have that shadow. Doesn't matter what lighting source you have, there needs to be some indicator so the player knows, okay, if I jump, where am I going?
Yeah, I was actually surprised that that was still an issue in Crash. Like, it felt even more exaggerated in the newest Crash.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where I kind of bailed on
Yeah,
platformers is when they went
Yeah.
3D. Because I couldn't see or I couldn't visualize my movements,
Yeah.
how they play out.
What I still remember, it was I want to say it was either Crash 4 or Crash 5. This was when Traveler's Tales like took the reins, and I was stuck at this one section where you have to once again run towards the camera, or I should do like this. That would make more sense. And the problem was you couldn't see Crash's feet because of how the camera was panned, so it became near impossible to gauge your jumps. And of course, at the rate that you're moving, you couldn't actually respond in time to a lot of those jumping elements. And I just got so frustrated. I was like, you know what? I don't want to play Crash anymore.
That's really bad playtesting. You know, for something like that. Someone screwed up when they made it like that.
Yeah, and again, it's why the camera is so pivotal to platformers. And I was remember one of the developers I was following on Twitter was like talking about they were making a 2D plan. I was like, how like I didn't even think the camera was going to be this difficult. And I was just sitting there going, it sounds like you're just like copying my book at this point. How tough the camera is.
everybody knows that the camera is a boss in Dark Souls also. So
Mm-hmm. The 3D platformer, like when we talk about like where it kind of came and went, I think we can all agree that it kind of went to Super Mario 64 and then it just stopped. Like everyone just borrowed and copied the Super Mario 64 formula with the whole hub world. Everyone loves collecting those various MacGuffins, stars, jiggies, eggs. There's like a litany of 3D platformer MacGuffins out there. So I guess for both of you, besides again Mario, were there any other 3D platformers? I know Seth, you mentioned Spyro. Any other ones that really stood out during this era?
Mario 64 for me. I mean, really,
Mario Galaxy.
Yeah. It's a little bit later though, but yeah, Mario Galaxy was a masterpiece for sure.
Yes. I mean, like Banjo-Kazooie, I think a lot of people will hold Banjo-Kazooie as like the number 2 3D platformer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, like I always felt that was maybe like a touch overrated. Well, if Josh annoyed the Crash fans, I'm going to annoy all the Banjo-Kazooie fans.
No, I agree with you there too. I think I felt like Banjo was like was rated a bit too high. I mean, the gold standard that Mario established was 64 with the camera controls and with the movement. It was just really hard to match that. And even if you try to copy it, good luck.
And I will still say this is the hill I will die on. That Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts was a fantastic game, and everyone who said it wasn't is wrong. There's my hill I will die on for this cast here.
Fair enough. Again, the character design and animation was amazing in Banjo-Kazooie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It had some interesting movement abilities, but it still just could not, I think, get those two working. And this is, again, where we saw kind of like the 3D platformer die in the 2000s, when even Sonic just could not keep up with Mario. I mean, Sonic Adventure, I will give Sega credit, like, they were very experimental with Sonic during the 2000s.
They tried everything. They tried this way, that way to see what would work. I mean, everybody was experimenting at that time, so it was good.
I mean, I like Sonic Adventure. I felt it was a really great concept, but I know this is something that Josh and we talked about when it came to iteration, that Sega just never managed to, put their foot down and say, this is our core gameplay loop for Sonic going forward. How do we iterate on that? Instead, it was like, okay, this is Sonic Adventure 2. This is Sonic Heroes. This is, there's the Sonic, like, they're like a team. Like, like the 3 different characters, each with their own powers. And they just never managed to grow beyond just everything feeling like a prototype for something else.
Yeah, most definitely.
I like the idea of different characters with different abilities. Asymmetrical gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
Really good. And, when I guess it was Nintendo that kind of pioneered that with the platform.
Super Mario Brothers 2, at least here in the United States, had those different jump elements.
Yeah.
And speaking about that, as a kind of a brief tangent, I want to get both of your thoughts on this concept, because Thorn has talked about this on the Discord several times about an experimental platformer idea, and that was having RNG jumps. That when you jump, the actual jump height is randomized. And it sounds like both could be a very interesting idea, but it could also sound like it could be a complete nightmare in terms of level design.
Yeah, remember when I said about precision jumps?
Yeah. That goes against like two. For one, RNG is like always just kind of like, I'd like to see it implemented, at least tried to see what it would do. But again, that goes against what Seth's saying about the precision, and then also it takes away your understanding of whatever precision you have in the platforming, right? Because it's randomized. So that could lead to the like most ultimate frustrating platformer of all time, which might be good. I don't know.
The Kaizo fans may love it. We don't know.
The Kaizo fans might dig it. You get some really good level design, you might be able to pull it off.
If you like Super Meat Boy, you're gonna love this.
Yeah.
Die a million times.
No offense to that, but that has been the tagline for a lot of indie game platformers over the last decade.
Or how about, instead of randomizing it, how about some way to increase your jump, right? So like by, like you were saying, maybe like some roguelike elements or upgrading elements, so they could, of course, but I think a lot of platformers would do, but right, you could upgrade your jump height, something like that.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
I still hold that it's really a shame that more people didn't try and copy the whole agility orb from Crackdown. That idea that every time you pick up those orbs, it increases your jump height.
It's a good game. Such a good game. Crackdown was so cool. So much neat little stuff in it. Go ahead about the orb thing again.
And I was going to say, and every time you level up, your jump gets progressively higher and higher. So you go from jumping 5 feet in the air to 25 feet, and then you're 500 feet just super jumping around skyscrapers.
Yeah, see, I mean, and that would work in a platformer, right? You become more adept the more you platform, so you should be developing higher jumping skills, and right?
Yeah, calves of steel.
Yeah, calves of steel, man.
And the other thing is level design would be really interesting for that, because you'd be coding level design for people with different jump level.
Yeah. And so you could offer a lot of verticality, a lot of secrets. It could open up a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, definitely.
There's our game idea proof of concept for this episode.
There we go.
We give $1 million ideas out every time we do a cast.
Every time.
And to what Seth was just saying about having the level design kind of afford to different jumping styles. That again is where I think Mario and Nintendo have really pioneered that aspect, that you can approach a level 5 different ways based on your own skill at it. And it's why I think like the three Marios in particular have been such a joy to watch speedrunners. Like when you
Yeah.
watch someone do like Super Mario Odyssey, I think is a really good example of this. Like you can play Super Mario Odyssey very basically, and you're like, yeah, I mean, it's an okay 3D platformer. Or you can play like, okay, I'm going to a jump into a Cappy jump, into a wall jump, off of Cappy, into a spin dive, and it's just like, and then I just skip a quarter of this level.
Yeah, unbelievably dynamic movement, and again, that also had a really nice, like again, like introducing new mechanics, novelty mechanics, and then incorporating them properly into the level design. So like the level was based entirely around the mechanic, explained well. So a lot of cool stuff in that one for sure.
You know, something interesting that I was just thinking about, and it's a kind of a related, you know, an adjacent topic, is how the internet changed platform. Back in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, probably up to about 97, when people didn't really have an internet connection, you didn't know or had to find, heard about it in school,
The playground.
you know, the different secrets or glitches in some cases. And then once the internet, you know, came out, people were sharing the information all over the place. So level design would have needed to change to compensate for that. And I would think that secrets got more difficult or less prevalent. I don't know because I wasn't playing them at that time, but that's an interesting design question, is how do you adapt to the sharing of information?
See, actually, that was like one of the topics that we wanted to talk about. I think that how the internet has changed how you have to develop a game and plan around it. I think like competitive based games, like they can be broken instantly. I think like a video is released the next day.
Yeah.
How to break this deck, how to break this fighter.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so how do you plan? And I think you're right, Seth, that I think I've noticed like less secrets in games just because the amount of work that's required to put into it and the payoff once the secret is known, it's not a secret anymore. And so it's not maybe, you know, yeah, but it does seem like there has been like, Josh, do you think there's less secrets now in games due to that fact?
Yeah, I
I
think
mean, is it a,
like from the independent side, we still see developers who really go all in. Like
yeah,
stuff
really
like
trying hard.
Daniel Mullins with Pony
Yeah.
Island and Inscription. Or even, I would say, like, From Software is maybe one of the few developers who are still doing that. But even with that said, as Seth was saying with the internet, it's no longer, you know, you're alone in deciphering these things. It's now, I can go to a Steam forum, or Discord, Reddit, whatever, and we now have tens of thousands or millions of eyes looking over every inch of this code and every area. And yeah, like some of the magic has been lost, I think, in that respect.
Yeah.
Big time. And I don't think like, and I know there's a big swath of people that won't even play a game without looking at the fact first because they don't want to waste their time turning down the wrong corridor, upgrading the wrong thing. And so a lot of like experiment, like even playing the game has been streamlined and like fact out. So it's the experimentation of some of it has been taken out also. So yeah, definitely a topic. We're veering off of platforming, but definitely something to discuss there.
Yeah, for sure.
Same with, you know, other genres that I'm more familiar with, like deck builders and strategy. You know, everybody watches a certain set of streamers in that community to, you know, get the best tactic. And I think that reduces the enjoyment of the game in some way.
For sure.
When we talk about this on a roundtable or for one of the other casts, I will definitely bring up a lot of the deck builders, especially while I was playing with Marvel Snap. Like that's a 40-minute conversation easily.
Like how is the game even fun anymore once it's like, you know, the meta's figured, it's solved. The riddle is solved. So there's nothing left for you to figure. That's the whole game. So I don't know. That's the
But we
Josh,
better
if
be.
you want to get on a call and do a Marvel Snap,
No,
we can do that.
All right,
no,
let's do
no.
that. Sure. But to get this back on the topic, one thing that we haven't discussed yet, and this is definitely, I think, will probably take us to like the final section, is of course the rise of indie, and more specifically, the rise of difficulty when it comes to platformers. Because, as you were saying, the 3D era became dominated by Mario. That was basically it. Like, there were some notable games. We saw, again, Banjo-Kazooie, Crash, even I'm going to really date myself, like Billy Hatcher was Sega's other experimental 3D platformer, but no one managed to beat them. And in response, 3D
Bubsy?
platforming... What was that?
Bubsy? Bubsy?
Oh, yeah, everyone loves Bubsy.
Yeah, man.
But this...
Those were games with huge budgets. They weren't really indie. When did the indie platformer start? Really kicking in?
That one, if we wanted to be very loose in that regard, we could mention something like Cave Story, which I think that was
Cave
like
Story.
2003, 2004.
Yeah.
But that was definitely more of a Metroidvania aspect of
Yeah.
it. But in terms of like actual reflex-driven, like hardcore platformers, we can easily trace that to the rise of Super Meat Boy.
Meat Boy, yeah.
And 1 second while I close my door, someone is vacuuming.
Yeah, but definitely, like, I think Meat Boy, and that's when, like, the Xbox indie arcade thing kind of started. So, yeah, all the, like, indie stuff was starting to pop then.
Yeah, so, like, Super Meat Boy, Team Meat, of course, the summer of Xbox games. Again, like, Microsoft, this was, I think, 2008, 2009, give or take, that they wanted to promote more games. And they did, of course, the indie trifecta at that time, which would be Super Meat Boy, Fez, and Braid. And Braid is actually a really good point. We didn't bring this up. There were a lot of adventure-style platformers. Stuff like Flashback, Out of This World, and then going to the indie space, the Swapper, Braid, and Limbo. Oh, yeah, of course. Limbo. Thomas Was Alone. I guess here's a question for both of you. What do you think of kind of like the adventure or puzzle-solving platformers? So these would be the ones where it's not about, hardcore jumping. It's more about figuring out, okay, I'm here. How do I get over here? Provide with, whatever jump angles I have or, manipulating the environment.
What was that one with the goat called? Goat Escape? Escape Goat?
Scapegoat, I think it was.
Yeah. I mean, like, I love games, like, I loved Scapegoat, so that would fit a game in that vein. I think they're excellent. It's just another way to expand on it. And you can do a lot of different, really unique concepts with it in that regard, limiting the play space to 2D, do a lot of stuff with it. Seth?
I thought Out of This World was Out of This World.
It was, totally. I would have dreams about it. Yeah.
I was bored. I thought Limbo was good. I didn't play a lot. Abe's Odyssey, would you consider that?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I didn't play many of them, but the ones I played, I really, really enjoyed. And obviously they required less physical dexterity and more mental dexterity. And that's where I am,
One thing, if we didn't bring this up, we would get like reamed over the coals. But what do you guys consider Tomb Raider to be part of 3D platformers? I always thought they were more like an action adventure.
No, that's action adventure. Yeah.
If you consider Tomb Raider a platformer, you're going to consider what's the one? God. The latest, or one of the latest ones, has the plane sequence.
Uncharted?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, yeah. With Flashback? Was it with Flash? Jumping Flash. The Jumping Flash, a 3D platformer?
Kind of, I would say.
Yeah.
It's very weirdly perspective.
Yeah.
But one thing I guess that's a really good point to kind of clarify that when we talk about platforming or platforming design, it's always built on that focus on the jumping and the moving through the environment is the main core gameplay loop. Like maybe one of those games that kind of skirts that line would be like a Mirror's Edge, which was kind of like
Yeah.
first person shooter or first person combat, but you were still moving around. There was a lot of physicality to that.
Yeah, that was impressive. I couldn't play it, but I would love watching it. Just awesome game.
Mm-hmm. So to bring this back to the independent space, the indie going from like Super Meat Boy, we really began to see this evolution of the difficult platformer, where Mario was still kind of known as, it's the platformer for everyone, for kids of all ages. We saw, Super Meat Boy, Spelunky, let's see, where's some other, Celeste. And the entire, 2010s, I felt, from the independent side, became this kind of chase for difficulty. I Want to Be the Guy. That whole series is another big example of that.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I think it just there was a documentary based off of the Braid. Was it? Well, Meat Boy was in the documentary.
Yeah, Indie Game the movie, right?
Indie Game the movie,
Yeah.
right? So it really sparked a big thing. I mean, Meat Boy was massive. Everybody was chasing after it. So clearly, people thought, okay, well, of course, with the proliferation of Unity and other engines, the ability to make a platformer, of course, the formula's there, right? So of course, indies were probably extracting, okay, well, difficult platformers are in, so that's probably created a massive swath of them. But again, when you're doing a platformer, all the basics need to be in there, like we were talking about, the coyote time, proper jumping responses, and all that stuff. So even if you make it super difficult or Kaizo type, you still need to have all the other elements in there properly for the platformer so it works.
I'm not familiar with Braid, but I just looked it up, and my God, it's gorgeous for an indie game.
Braid, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got to play it. Yeah, give it a go. It's a really, really nice experience. And I think it isn't that long either.
Yeah, not
right?
really.
Yeah.
At least not compared to say a Super Meat Boy in terms of trying to get through it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm still at the last. No, I'd be in Super Meat Boy. Yeah.
Yeah,
I wouldn't play Super Meat Boy. I'd kill myself.
You might be able to get through one level or two,
Yeah, exactly. And then my computer would be thrown out the window.
And with the 2010s era of 2D platforming, we kind of saw, this is kind of when we saw the reinvention of platforms. And the independent space, much like with horror, especially when we get to horror as a genre, I think is really pivotal in keeping platformers alive. And again, there are far more indie platformers that have been released and we have time to mention in this conversation. I like the games from Loco Molito, did Curse Castilia, Super Hydora. He does a lot of retro style games with a modern touch to them. The Alwa series, ALWA, Alwa's Awakening and Alwa's Legacy are kind of more, I would say maybe more Metroidvania than some of the other ones. But I guess as a question, obviously I'm sure Seth didn't play Celeste, because if Super Meat Boy would make you throw out your computer, this would definitely do it. But for you, Josh, did you play Celeste? And if you did, yes. What did you think about it?
I love Celeste. I love the movement tech that it allowed. And it was just a really solid game, it was very it was a more advanced cave story in a way to me. And I love Celeste. Excellent level design. Really good.
It's a huge seller. I mean,
yeah,
they made a crap ton of money on it. So that's good. Spelunky, I guess in the 2010s. That was more like 15 or 16, I guess. That's really the only one I played.
Hmm. Yeah, and Spelunky, like when we talk about kind of like implementing RNG into a platformer, Spelunky did that with its level design. The,
Yeah.
I think the problem for me with Spelunky as a platformer is that it just never, like, the RNG itself, I think, really limits the actual level design. Again, like, the platformer genre is one of those where, again, like, you really need that level to have that, not only the handmade touch, but it needs to be interesting to go through. And I always saw with Spelunky, it was kind of like, once I had the skill, the entire level was solved at that point. Like, it
Yeah.
couldn't really
Yeah.
develop that sense of personality in the same way as, pick any recognizable level in a Super Mario game, or even any of the worlds in the 3D titles, that it just never got to that point for me.
Even though it was like procedurally generated, it still was like the same. It still felt like you're playing the same level over and over again. So it really, so.
How is that any different than going back to Mario Brothers? And I knew by heart, pretty much every level, and I could do it in my sleep, and I did, and I would play it and play it and play it. So what happened between that period and Spelunky where it got stale? What captured your attention in Mario Brothers that didn't in Spelunky when you were just repeating the same rote level? I mean, that's a question for design.
Yeah, like Josh was saying, like the design, the level design was not memorable, right? Because it's procedural, so there's nothing memorable about it. Like you can just take away movement mechanics, understand some of the roguelike stuff, and other than that, it's it. But you're not taking, oh, this is a beautiful level to look at, or like you don't remember the layout of the design because it changes every time, right? So
yeah.
Yeah, and I think the jump tech or the movement tech in Spelunky it doesn't compare to, say, any of the Mario games. And again, that's by design. Like, if they tried to force you to learn movement tech, like a Super Meat Boy on top of the brutal difficulty of Spelunky, I think it would just, like, that would be, like, a step too far for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Now, we are about at an hour. I just have a few more points, and then we'll wrap it up. What do you, again, like, I'm not sure how familiar both of you are when it comes to the Kaizo scene. Like, Kaizo has really been, like, an indie, like, it's really been, like, I think, really stuck in the independent space. Specifically, I think it got noticed thanks to speedrunners. Like, every GDQ, there's at least one, or maybe even two or three Kaizo-style games that are ran. And on one hand, I love the idea of seeing creators like get just massively like into making a Mario level, Sonic level, whatever. But I think it's that same issue, and this is, I think, a question for you, Josh, since you play a lot of action games like I do. Do you like games, or when we get to like this level of brutal precision level difficulty, like something that's like Celeste times 2, like for me, I tend to start to get bored with these games in the sense that it's like, okay, it's going to be require this 100 itemized list of mechanics and movement tech, and that's it. Like there's no, I guess it becomes more of an exercise rather than like an expression.
Yes, exactly. It's more like, like I guess exercise would be the best word for it. The same way I run up against a boredom wall myself, and it's like, they're really cool, and actually they're probably some of my favorite things to watch at GDQ, just to watch the skill involved. But me myself, like playing them, I'd rather, a little bit more accessible. I can, Meat Boys fine with me, but when it's just an exercise in perfection, like executing exactly the mechanics like exactly, and it's a huge, like you said, a list of over 40 to get through to the level. It's not fun, right? It's just an exercise in perfection. So,
what about in the Game Jam scene? Is there anything that's come out of Game Jam that's gone commercial or gone to Steam or Itch.
Celeste was a Game Jam game.
Wow.
I can think of stuff like Forger and Super Hot, but they're not obviously platforms.
Super Hot is great.
I would say, like, if we're talking like underground indie names in platforming, Freedom Planet was a good one. That was like, it started as a Sonic fan made game, and then I think because they couldn't get the license for Sonic, they just completely like change all the characters around. But like, you can tell that this is a Sonic. This was inspired by Sonic. Another one that I haven't had a chance to really play yet, but I've heard good things about, is Spark the Electric Jester. This is from a sole developer, and like, he's gone from making like a very simple platformer to now he's just basically making like his own take on Sonic Adventure. And it's just like insane how much he could do just by himself in terms of making a 3D Sonic style game.
Yeah, I mean, is he doing it on Unreal or?
I want to say yes. I know it's out now, but I haven't had a chance to play other than the demo.
Okay.
But yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
No, because like making even like you can do a lot like solo with Unreal if you're if you understand enough about it, you can definitely accomplish a ton in it, and so you could be amazed what a solo dev can do with in like Unreal. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. We are just over an hour, so we're kind of running a little bit long for this first episode, but I guess that's good for the trial. So, I guess I'm trying to think if there's anything else about the indie side. Anything from either of you two for platformers?
No, I think that covers it up, Seth.
Oh, let's go back to the topic of, or the I don't know, the way that we're trying to do these podcasts,
mm-hmm.
the subject. What are the influential games throughout the time period? Mm-hmm. Let's just name them out. Obviously we have Mario Brothers. That's the dad, not Mario. Yeah, Mario, mm-hmm. Not Mario. My brain has died. That's it. I'm spent. I don't know what to say anymore. Obviously, so in the indie space, what are the real independent influential ones?
Well, I would probably say that if we talk about like from the brutal difficulty side, obviously I think Super Meat Boy kind of takes that, probably started, and we could probably argue that Celeste is maybe the new standard, at least when it comes to the mainstream. And for people watching, you probably noticed we haven't mentioned stuff like Hollow Knight and Ori.
Hollow Knight.
And of course...
Yeah, I was going to say Ori.
Yeah. And that's when we get to the Metroidvania side, so that will be for another conversation. I guess...
Oh, Ori is a Metroidvania?
Yeah, Ori is definitely a Metroidvania.
Mm-hmm. What about, like, Rogue Legacy?
That could maybe be like in the platforming side. It does have more of a Metroidvania aspect to it, I would say, with the whole castle upgrades and stuff like that.
Okay.
I guess for the kind of like adventure platformer, can you guys think of any independent ones? I mean, I can think of stuff like the Swapper.
Well, Limbo was
Limbo
certainly, and the sequel. I don't remember what the sequel is.
Inside, I think it was. Yeah,
Inside.
I would say one final, I guess, like just to encapsulate, and when we talk about influential games from the adventure platformer side, I think Limbo would be one of the biggies out of the independent space in terms of this idea of let's have a mood to our platforming. That it wasn't, a super precise hardcore platformer. It's about let's make a creepy platformer. Let's, everyone remembers when you walk for that first time, you see like this like giant like spider arm. Come out. It's like, what's that going to do? And you get plugged for the first time.
Yeah, I had my some cousins come over and they were young and they started playing it and they get the little spy. Yeah, they were traumatized.
So I think with that, we can certainly wrap things up for this first episode. I guess just to summarize for the people watching, again, platforming is a very reflex, very mechanically driven genre. If it doesn't feel right to play from minute one, then you don't have a good platformer. And it's why, for a lot of independent developers watching, or students, if you're wanting to make a good platformer, just figure out how your movement tech is going to work. Because if it's not enjoyable to move and jump, no amount of story, no amount of puzzles is going to fix that.
Yeah, definitely. And we were talking about this before, but like for platformers, so like if when you're working on a platformer, so not only do you want to play like the good ones, play like Mario and stuff like that, but also play some bad ones. Play like Little Big Planets. I understand it might not be a bad one, but play other different type of platformers. Play them all so you understand the movement mechanics. Because like we've said, responsiveness, level design, what else? Animation, all those things. Study what works in them and then what doesn't work. So then you have an idea of how a jump usually works and how the coyote time works or how the inverse gravity works on a jump and stuff like that. Understand those basic things. Extract the right stuff in the independent space. It's not just all about difficulty, right? It is about movement, level design, and all those other things, graphics and stuff like that. That's all I got to say.
And of course, playtest your game.
Playtest.
Get 25, 50 people hammering at it that have never seen it before and collect the feedback. Because that's probably one of the best steps that you can take to getting a good score on Steam.
Mm-hmm. And like even something like Thomas Was Alone, just to give that game a little bit more credit, but it's a game where you're just literally controlling shapes. And they still manage to not only tell a really great story, but the platforming was also really solid. Again, was it Mario levels of technical depth? No. But it has to feel right. Whether you're designing a game around, 30 different kinds of jumps and movement tech, or just having your character go like this. If it doesn't feel good in your hands, nothing is going to fix that. There's no amount of story, no amount of graphical polish, no amount of you want to add horror and gore and whatever. If it doesn't feel good, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, and I know, Josh, like you have played probably more indie platformers than the average person, and you can attest to the first thing other than like poor menus is bad movement, right? It just doesn't feel good, and then you don't want to play the game anymore. So,
oh yes.
So every influential game that we have played felt great in our hands to play, and we've enjoyed the way they feel to move. So that's like the key aspect, one of the key aspects.
Yeah. And you can do that even with very physics-driven games. Again, as a quick rattling them off, stuff like the End series. I enjoyed Webbed from the independent space. Like when it's more about like that, the actual physics of your jump, but that gets very more involved. There's a lot more to like rant and rave about that, maybe for a future episode. So I think. Oh, go ahead.
I'd like to do maybe a game with them. Just our general roundtable on accessibility, because there's some interesting accessibility topics we can discuss on the platformer side of things, as well as everything.
Mm-hmm. All the other genres.
Definitely. For sure. All right. But, gentlemen, I think that will do it for this first episode. So, for the people watching, thank you so much for tuning in. Let us know what you think about this format going forward, what genres you would like us to tackle next, and if you are a developer of any one of the genres out there that you really want to talk about what games inspired you, and would like to come on as a special guest for a future episode, definitely reach out. So, I'm going to give everyone give a chance to plug anything you would like, social media, whatever. This time we'll go with Seth, and we'll work our way around to Josh.
Hey, I'm Seth, so I run the Strategy Informer, which is a cool project for discovering great strategy games, and that covers everything. That covers card games and board games and all that stuff. The links are going to be down below, because Josh is great with putting those there. I also do, contracting and consulting, But I wouldn't contact me for a platformer game. It's not my specialty. Yeah, so, thanks for having me. And I got to talk a little more than I expected.
Awesome. Yeah, and again, my links are going to be down below. So currently working on Samurai Pig, Casual Game Studio. Links are down below. Follow me, wishlist the game. And if you have any ideas about what you want to talk about, platform or any other than platform or something else, just leave comments down below. And I had a great time talking. So,
all right. So again, for me, Twitter, for however long it still remains viable, is over there. Discord, Patreon, do that liking, subscribing, and commenting. If you want more about platformers and learn about their design, be sure to check out my book, Game Design Deep Dive Platformers, and then just buy random amounts of all the other books as well. Just close your eyes and just put whatever number you want in, and that'll be fine.
Use a random number generator.
Exactly.
Christmas is coming up, so get them for all your friends.
Yeah.
There we go. All right, so with that said, everyone, we'll be recording another one of these at some point. It took a whole lot for us to get the timings down for this one, but hopefully we'll be able to do things more regularly. But with that said, come back for discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where it's in the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.